At this point, we have a very special person who's going to present to us. And you've heard her before, most of you. That's Mary Starrett from Oregon. Mary has a long list of things that she's done, including running for U.S. Senate, running for almost, well, probably won the county commissioner's race last year, and done so many exciting things for the party, for the cause. She's background in journalism and radio and television and so many things. She's just a great, faithful person to the cause that we all believe in, and a very entertaining person. She likes deer. Won't you know that? But she doesn't eat them. She likes to watch deer. I like to watch deer too, but I do something different with them than Mary does. Anyway, Mary Starrett, would you come forward and tell us? It's better to have loved and lost than never have to loved at all, or in this case, better to have run and lost than never to have run at all.
Yes, Darrell reminded me that it Jim might have been misunderstood, and Darrell thought that Jim said Mary likes beer, and anyhow, it's nice to see you all, and it's really encouraging because it's so easy to give up. And especially with what we're facing in our political climate, it's really an encouragement to hear from the experts. And I wish I had Janine and Nicholas in Oregon last year about this time, because I'd have a different outcome to my speech. In any event, I'm very happy to be here, and I want to thank the folks who put this together. And this was we've got a lot of hard workers in this party. Yeah, Allison called me and she said, what is the title of your speech? And I just came up with better to have run and lost than never to have run. And then I thought, well, maybe I should have named it Mama Told Me Not to Run. I ran for governor under the Constitution Party banner, and after that worked as a communications director for the party for a number of years. And one of the things that I found was that whether or not we won a race, at least number one, the issues got out there, the cause of restoring our country to limited constitutional government got out there, and we got a lot of free ink for the Constitution Party. So if you're running a race, remember it's really a lot about getting the word out about what the issues are, even if you have to basically hold your opponent's feet to the fire by bringing up these issues. So a year ago, or a year and a half ago, I agreed to run for Yamhill County Commissioner. Yamhill, it's from the Yamhilis Indians in Oregon, and it's 15 miles south of Portland. That goes till about 11 miles towards the Pacific Ocean. And there are about 100,000 people in a rural conservative county. But what's happening in Yamhill County, which is becoming a very well-known wine industry area, is you've got a lot of liberal people in the wine industry moving into our county, and lo and behold, the tables are turning. Where we had a very conservative county, now things are getting very liberal. And these winery people bring with them a lot of money to support candidates like my opponent when I ran for county commissioner. Interestingly enough, and you might have seen this in your own area, when the liberal Democrats can't seem to win an election by telling people who they are, they will make it a nonpartisan race. Have you seen that happen before? They will turn it into a nonpartisan race, as they did with voter approval, by saying, you know what, it's getting really very acrimonious and politics is getting too ugly. Let's just make it nonpartisan. What that is code for is we can't get reelected in this area if we call ourselves what we are, kind of like what Rick Perry did. When Rick Perry wanted to be governor, well, you can't do it as a Democrat, so you just got to change your affiliation. And you really haven't changed who you are. So when I agreed to run for county commissioner, I remember thinking, how hard could this be? And how bad could this be? And how dirty could this be? After all, the two women, there were 3 women on the county commissioner board. 2 of them were conservative Republicans. One of them was a rabid, die-hard liberal attorney from Boston, and her name was Mary Stern. So I had to run against somebody who had a very similar name, and I couldn't call myself anything. It was a nonpartisan race. So one of the things I had to set out to do, and Gary Odom helped me oftentimes to come up with ways to do this, was to make sure that we had distinctively differentiated the good Mary from the bad Mary. And one of the ways you did that was to essentially out them. Now, my father told me, you know, growing up in Brooklyn, he says, you know, you might not be the toughest kid in the schoolyard, but if you throw the first punch, chances are good they'll leave you alone. So what I did the day I filed for county commissioner is I was quoted in the paper as saying, what we should do is make sure that we stop repeat offenders, and that is don't reelect them. So right out of the gate, that was a nasty thing to say, I know, but then I listed all the taxes my opponent had supported, 8 taxes over her 4 years, 2 4-year terms in office, and she was going for her last 4-year term. So that was nasty, and I remember thinking, oh, I shouldn't have done that, because she came out saying that she wasn't going to be nasty, and then I thought, here I come out being nasty. But the newspaper never let go the fact that I was a member of the Constitution Party. And what they wanted to do was to pit the Republicans who had supported me and rallied around me with money and strategy and people. What they wanted to do was to pit the Republicans against the Constitution Party members by pointing out the difference. So they would always take stuff from our website. You know, they love to take the part about Jesus Christ and use it as a rallying point to those who are not believers to say, look at these crazy fringe lunatics. Do you want to vote for somebody who belongs to a party who has Jesus Christ in the preamble? Anyway, the newspaper went on to say they were trying to paint a picture of who I was. Starrett grew up in a staunchly conservative family. Her Irish father helped found the Conservative Party of New York, and its platform would resonate with that of today's Constitution Party, where Starrett had found such a comfortable home. Then they go on to say, the Constitution Party firmly embraces Christianity, asserting the United States was founded by Christians and American jurisprudence demands a reorientation. So they take that chunk, and every article they wrote about me, they put that one in there. Okay, folks, this is who you'd be voting for. Now, how do you differentiate yourself in a nonpartisan race? So what I started doing was, right out of the chute, align myself with code to the conservatives. And what I did was I aligned myself with, I got a lot of endorsements. I got gun groups, I got pro-life groups, I got land use groups, and I made sure that every time we got an endorsement, it went up on the website and it went to the newspapers. So right away, people started to see there was a difference. My opponent was very good in the 8 years she'd been in office. She managed never once to list an endorsement in her voters pamphlet. And that was because what do people do when they don't know who they're voting for? They look down and see the list of endorsements and say, oh, you got a gun endorsement, you're pro-life endorsement, you're conservative, you're somebody I want to vote for. Well, she didn't do that. She was very smart. So what I did was I figured, okay, I got to scream conservative. I've got to scream constitutionalist without saying that I belong to a particular party. So what I did was my very first fundraiser, while my opponent, Mary Stern, was having wine tastings, and they were, you know, $200 and $500 a person wine tastings. I had a concealed handgun license class and a Utah permit class for, and we raised an awful lot of money. Then I also kind of got that Tea Party thing in there, and the chairman of our local Constitution Party in Oregon came up with that, and he said, look, it's just going to be code. It's just going to be code to the conservatives. So that's what we immediately started in this nonpartisan race, saying, who are you? The other thing we did was we put signs up everywhere we could, because as one of the people in the campaign said, look, the only people who own any land are the Republicans or the conservatives. So all of these farmers were the ones who had money, had land, let us put our signs up. So everywhere you went in the county, there was a huge sign up, enormous signs. And we had the conservatives, we had people coming on board who had never been involved in politics before. We had to draw a contrast between my opponent and myself. My issues were jobs. Now, my opponent had just voted for a statewide ballot measure and pushed it, even though she wouldn't admit it, which was going to tax the rich and tax the business owners. Now, in a recession, that makes no sense. It doesn't make sense when it's not a recession. But she wouldn't admit that she did that. So we had to get her to admit it, which never happened. Anyway, I campaigned against regional government. I campaigned against what we call Metro, which is this overlay of government, another taxing authority, and another authority that usurps the county commissioner's level. Because really, when you think about it, your county commissioners are the last line of defense against federal laws that are tyrannous and state laws that are tyrannous. In Oregon, we have the most draconian land use laws in the nation. Actually, in 1974, we were supposed to be the model for land use. Well, there's not one state that has adopted our land use laws, because in the state of Oregon, you can't do anything on your property. So I pointed out that her voting on land use issues was not good. I also pointed out, again, all the taxes that she had supported. Also pointed out that I was a pro-life candidate, and that at the county commission level, that really does hold some weight, because in our county, we were able to, actually a number of years ago, some conservative county commissioners were actually able to say, we don't want state funds if it's going to provide abortions, and we went on to use our own money for health centers without taking money for abortions from the state of Oregon. Now, that was something we wanted to hold on to, and we knew if we lost that majority on the county commissioners, then that would be the very first thing to go. So the headlines were interesting things that would say, in Yamhill County, Mary Starrett tries to Tea Party her way into the county commissioner's seat. Now, the other thing is, when I wanted to get an endorsement for a pro-life endorsement, Oregon Right to Life is someone that we had taken down and bloodied in the past for being too compromising. And now I had to make nice to them so that I could get their endorsement. So everybody made a big issue about that in the media, that these people that we had pilloried in the past, that I had pilloried in the past, I was now asking for their endorsement. And they very kindly forgave me. It was a pretty nasty, ugly thing that we did to them to try to let people realize that giving your money to this Right to Life organization wasn't getting us anywhere. And so we started our own Right to Life organization, and we achieved an awful lot more than they did with all their money and all of their volunteers. So that actually became statewide news that the Oregon Right to Life had endorsed the candidacy. So we did the normal things, wore out a lot of shoe leather, went door to door, raised money as best we could, and we found that when we went to business owners, they were really reluctant to give me money, because what they said was, this is going to show up in the C&Es, and your opponent is really, frankly, kind of scary. Which was very interesting to me. So then they wound up funneling money to us through other means where it wouldn't show up on our C&Es. So much for campaign finance reporting. Anyhow, this was an uncontested primary, which means we had a Democrat in a nonpartisan race, and we had a Republican in a backed person in a race, but there were no other people running. So this was a race that was supposed to be over in May. And I say supposed to be over because it wasn't. So election night in May, one of us was supposed to win this race. And what happened was, the reporter who had been giving me a hard time, the newspapers were all on my opponent's side, came up to me. We were having our election night at a state senator's home, and came up to me and she said, how does it feel to have lost the race? And I thought to myself, I don't know that I've lost the race yet, but I guess she knows more than I do. I've never done this before. She didn't know that in the back room, we had the state senator's son, who was another state senator, calling us in with information from the county, letting us know that our numbers were actually a whole lot better than were being reported. So on the next day on the website, there was the headline that says, Stern wins commissioner's race. And she had said to me, gee, how does it feel to lose the race? Well, not so fast. Because when I went to bed that night, my opponent was up 915 votes. And when I woke up the next day, my opponent was up by 4. So in any event, they wound up getting this is vote by mail. So all of the votes had to come in from all of the counties, and they began counting all of these votes. It went on and on and on. For more than 1 month, it was not official. And then what they decided was that at the end of the day, since you know, this thing hadn't come to any kind of a conclusion, they finally came up with a tally that said I had a 9-vote lead. So I had won the race. But in Oregon, you have to have 50% plus 1 vote. We had 44 write-ins. And those 44 write-ins meant that nobody got 50% plus 1 vote. And all I can remember is when I woke up and when that whole month went by, and it was a long month, and we tried everything we could to make sure that we could kick those votes out, that we could avoid a runoff. I just remember lying in bed saying, okay, God, just kill me now. I can't do this again. It's like finding out when you're in labor, you got another 6 months to go. And I was really, and talk about a gutter fight. Somebody, you know, they think, you know, a local race is just not going to be all that brutal. Well, the state senator who was working with us on this campaign said, I have never seen anything so ugly. And it really was vicious. So we, you know, again, we had to have a recount before we had the decision. So we had a recount, and we had 30 people sitting in a room, and went on for 9 hours. And they recounted every single vote. And again, at the end, I was up by 9 votes. That meant we had to have a runoff. So that meant we go into November with this thing. Interestingly enough, throughout this whole thing, all they were talking about was the Constitution Party. The Constitution Party, every single article tried to paint the party as fringe. In fact, that was the word that was used more times than not. So one of the things I wanted to show you was what we did with our money. We didn't obviously have as much money as my opponent did. She was a 2-term, going for 3-term incumbent, had an awful lot of money, and we just didn't. So what we didn't have in money, we made up for by going door to door. And I knocked on doors every single day. We went to parades. We you know, set up booths wherever there were lots of people. And we did manage to scrape together enough money to run a commercial, a cable commercial on, in our county. And this was the commercial that we ran.
I'm Mary Starrett, candidate for Yamhill County Commissioner. For the past 8 years, my opponent pushed to raise your property taxes, income taxes, and business taxes. 7 new taxes in all. We can't afford another 4 years of that. I stood opposed. That's why the Taxpayer Association of Oregon endorsed me, Mary Starrett. We need less government and more jobs. I'm Mary Starrett. With your vote, we can say no to new taxes and yes to jobs here in Yamhill County.
You notice I had to say my name so many times because we had a Mary Stern and a Mary Starrett, and so I had to say Starrett, Starrett, Starrett over and over again. But my opponent was like a wounded animal, and she was not about to lose this time because she couldn't believe that there was any way she could have lost this thing going into it. So what we started finding out was that she was starting to play dirty big surprise. And what she did was she went, for many years I wrote on the website News with Views. I wrote political articles, and they were posted on newswithviews.com. And some of these articles included things where I had, I don't know, criticized President Bush, or perhaps suggested that 911, the official story, wasn't really the, wasn't the truth. And I questioned things like perhaps Martin Luther King, the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., was not the guy he was cracked up to be. And I feel like I've since been vindicated by Jackie Kennedy, who had some things to say about the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. But in any event, those were the things that she fed to the newspaper. And every week a story came out about Starrett's shocking column on Martin Luther King, code word for think racist. And then where I questioned 911, she's a truther. She questioned Bush. So what she did was she sent a mailer out to all of the registered Republicans in the county with quotes from my articles questioning Bush, suggesting that Bush was not adhering to the Constitution on lots of things that he did. And so what that did, she was very smart. It caused a lot of division. The Republicans who don't know what her position is on anything are now seeing that this crazy lunatic who's being supported by the Republicans criticized George Bush. So she sent out she sent out mailers to the registered Republicans, and that took a huge dent out of us. She fed the newspapers information. At one point, I stopped talking to the newspapers, and the guy says, you know, you really do need to talk to us. I said, look, I didn't talk to you guys, and I won the first time, so why do you think I need you? And you can say to them, I'm not going to talk to you. Send me a question, email me a question, and I'll send you an answer. But when they get a hold of us, they want nothing more than to destroy us. And they will use anything we say, but if you send them an email and play hardball with them, say, no, I'm not going to talk to you. Imagine the nerve of little you saying to the newspaper, I'm not going to talk to you. That just makes them want to talk to you more. So what we did was we got Oregon Right to Life, now that they liked me again, to send out a mailer. That didn't cost anything. We got the land use organizations to send out a mailer. That didn't cost anything. We got Oregonians for Immigration Reform to send out a mailer. That didn't cost anything. We got the gun rights group to send out a mailer. That didn't cost anything. So if you can get your peripheral support groups to send out mailers, which are really I mean, it's expensive to send out a mailer. Then what we did was, obviously, we're going to go ahead and we're going to merge the names and the numbers and the addresses so that we're not sending out as many as we have to. So that's what we did, and we did a commercial, and that helped a lot. Plus, we were everywhere there was to be. So what happened is that my opponent used to work in the prison system, and she worked for a guy by the name of Joe Crabtree. Joe Crabtree was a warden at a prison that she worked for. Our sheriff was Jack Crabtree. Jack Crabtree is a staunch conservative, and everybody who knows Jack Crabtree, the sheriff, knows he's hardcore conservative. But she was very smart. She had a robocall and a mailer all over the county from law enforcement officer Joe Crabtree. Well, all people heard was Crabtree, law enforcement, and this guy was endorsing my opponent. When the sheriff found out, he wrote a letter to the paper, and they put it this big on the back page of the newspaper. He was furious, but it was very effective because people thought, wow, the conservative guy is endorsing Mary Stern, we better vote for her. That, along with quotes from my articles about Martin Luther King, about President Bush, about 9/11. So, in the end, did I make a mistake by not getting those off the website before I ran for office? Yes or no? I mean, these are things that we have to decide. I know that this was a campaign that was so dirty and so ugly and so brutal that every day I would get up and I would say, dear God, I can't do this another day. But it was a campaign that was fueled by a lot of prayer. We were surrounded by people who understood that these were issues that had to do with life, truly, had to do with liberty, and had to do with limited government. And they rallied around us. Right about that time, a colleague of mine, who was a sitting commissioner and still is, Commissioner Leslie Lewis, was in an editorial board where we all used to go so that the newspapers could decide whether they wanted to endorse us. She was at an editorial board for Chamber of Commerce when my opponent came in, and she was asked, did she support measures 66 and 67, which were these ballot measures to increase taxes? Now, we'd never gotten her on record as saying she'd supported them. Well, my friend, a county commissioner, clicked on her video camera and had on tape this woman admitting that she had voted for these ballot measures. So what do you do when you get something like that? You thank God for it and you throw it up on YouTube. Well, she was furious with that and began, with the help of her friends at the state government, the Department of Justice, State Department of Justice investigation, where she went after the county commissioner. She went after us, and it was funny. I was on the phone. I had gotten a call from an investigator at the Department of Justice. This was during the end of the campaign, when it was all over the newspapers that Commissioner Leslie Lewis had done this terrible thing by getting Commissioner Stern to admit she was backing these taxes. So they wanted to, they had actually went and confiscated her computer, her laptop computer from her home, and asked for cell phone records and went through the whole thing. I mean, this was a political witch hunt. And so I was on the phone with a guy who called up and he said, "Hi, my name is Steve McNamara. I'm an investigator with the Department of Justice. Can I talk to you?" About the same time, my brother, who is a real staunch, he's the executive director of Oregon Firearms Federation and a friend of the Constitution Party, the exact same moment my brother called, and when my brother called, I knew there had to be some reason that he called, because he never calls me. And I picked up the phone, and he said, "You might be getting a call from the Department of Justice." And I said, "Oh, I'm on the phone with him right now." And he said, "Don't say a bleeping word to that guy." And he hung up the phone. And I realized he was right, because it was kind of one of those things where I would have gotten on the phone and said, who knows what, and it would not have been in my best interests. So anyway, the investigation went on all the way through till January, and they had a recall petition out for this. They wound up, she had to get a lawyer and everything. It was all a political ugliness at its best. But ultimately what they found out was that she didn't break any laws, because there was the assumption that this was an open forum. So she tried. But another thing that happened, which we wound up using to our best advantage, my opponent was at all of these debates. There would be standing room only. They would say in the newspaper, standing room only, because the debates had gotten between us had gotten so ugly. But what happened was, when she was surrounded by some of her friends at one of these Kiwanis debates or something, someone asked her the question, "Are you a liberal or are you a conservative?" And I was going to show it to you, but I thought better of it because it is rather offensive. So this is what she said, and of course, once again, once we got this, we put it up on YouTube. She said, "A liberal is someone with an open mind. Well, GD it, I'm a liberal." Well, what do you do with something like that? You make it into a DVD and send it to every pastor in the county. And you put it up on YouTube. So at the end of the day, at the end of the day, you really have to use anything that is handed to you. Think of it as a gift. Anything that your opponent does, never go to a debate without a camera rolling. Never go to a debate without somebody there who is going to videotape this, because chances are good you're going to get something that you can put up on YouTube. One of the interesting ways that we got people to see this stuff is we would put it up on YouTube under a different name. So obviously, we got to put it on something people are going to look for. So when it would pop up, it would be your opponent using the Lord's name in vain, and that was always a good thing. So you have to be one step ahead. Anyhow, basically what happened was, again, I want to read some of the things that happened regarding the Constitution Party, because I was always so pleased with the fact that the Constitution Party was getting some ink. It said, now we had a 75% voter turnout in this November race, 48% when we ran it the first time. The newspaper said the county showed a shift toward third parties this time, reflecting a shift also seen statewide. Both Republicans and Democrats lost voters to third parties, with Democrats losing the most. According to the responses in an anecdotal News Register survey, voters had strong interest in the hot county commissioner race between incumbent Mary Stern and Mary Starrett. The newspaper then went on to list all of the things I'd said about Barack Obama, things I'd said about illegal immigration, hardcore political views she displayed as a political talk show host and national communications director for the Constitution Party. Her body of online work doesn't sound like it possibly have come from the petite, ever-cheerful woman knocking on local doors in her blue jeans. And I said, I'll tell you what I said about Martin Luther King Jr. Get ready for the annual con job that's been foisted on the populace for 21 years. For if we judge Martin Luther King Jr. on the content of his character, not the color of his skin, surely no banks or schools or post offices would be shut down for the day. So, and all of this was designed to make me look like a lunatic. Not that I'm not, but it was something I had hoped to And then it said, they would write, more than anything, Starrett has put Stern's fiscal record in the crosshairs. She tells anyone who will listen that Stern has consistently displayed an elitist disregard for local taxpayers. Well, the day after the election, the headline read, Mary's sweat, another close one. In the end, there was another sleepless night, and the next morning, my opponent had 52% to my 48%. Interestingly enough, they're concerned that I'm going to try to do this again, although I don't think they have to worry because I need some time to come down from this gutter fight. MaryStarrett.org, when I was looking through these old newspaper articles to put this together, to put this address together, it was actually very disturbing. It was like I was reliving each blow in a really bad assault. And it was disturbing for me because it was horrible. Anybody who's run for office knows that it can be very ugly. But at the end of the day, it's a battle that has to be fought because if we don't step up to do it, we know they're going to step up to do it. And without any challenge from us, just hand them the keys to the Republic. It's all over. But they put MaryStarrett.org and have it listed in domains by proxy. And this is an organization where you can actually get a website in someone else's name and put all kinds of nasty stuff up there, and you don't have to show who has the website and is paying for it. So we found that they have that up there with quotes from my articles about George Bush and about Martin Luther King and about 9/11, and that's up there for all the world to see. But at the end of the day, I think that we all know that we are not the average political bear. We're not Republicans and we're not Democrats. We are people who acknowledge one thing, that this republic has veered long off course from where it was designed to be. And unless we're out there collecting signatures, and unless we're out there agreeing to run for office, and unless we're supporting this party and the people that have continued to make this thing work, we might as well just give up. And I know that we're not quitters, and I'm very glad to see that there's a bunch of people here that have no plans of giving up. Thank you.